Hey everybody, welcome to Chapter 5 of my FileMaker for Stage Lighting series. Today's video is going to take our Eos integration a little further and actually allow us to patch our show using the existing information and existing data link that we set up almost a year ago now when we first set up our Eos link in our FileMaker solutions. So if you're coming to this video for the first time, you're going to have a bad time. You're going to want to go back and especially look at lesson 2.6 and basically everything leading up to that in order to get a lot of the functionality that we're going to show today working. Also really important, make sure you have your FileMaker monkey bread software plugins installed before today and working, because they will, of course, for the Eos link, use that plugin quite extensively. So I'm going to jump right in. Here I've got opened up my previous work note solution that we've built. I had a focus assistant in here. I had an instrument list with all of this great stuff. I'm just kind of clicking around because it's been such a long time looking to see what we did before. And remember here we have our turn on and our sneak buttons that we did to be able, that was our basic Eos integration from back in chapter 2. So what we're going to be doing today is essentially taking the same things we learned then when we were doing the strings and taking them one step further and using them to send patch information over to our show as well. So let's go to our Eos settings. I made just a simple Eos layout here, and if you remember correctly, you have your Eos IP address. You've got a box here where we can actually type in messages, our sending port, a result, and then what user we want to send as. So real quick, I'm going to go in and get my IP address. Looks like I'm at 1.139. Of course, you want that to be whatever your Eos is. If you're running it on a separate computer, it would go there. For me, since I'm running it locally, I'm going to just put in my own IP address, and I'm going to put port 8001. And over here within Eos, I am going to turn on my OSC settings, string UDP settings. So I'm going to turn on string receive, and I'm going to set the receiving port to 8001. And you can choose whatever port you want. That's what's in my mind today, so I'm going to use 8001. So those two things match up, and that's really all we need to do. I'm going to go back to live over here in Eos and give myself just a simple screen, and I'm going to open up tab 99, which is our incoming or our diagnostics window, so I can actually see logging incoming UDP here. I'm going to hit that create socket button, which is what created the link for us before. And remember, if we go to data viewer, we can see that socket has been created. And now I'm going to go back over to my focus assistant just to do a quick test. So here's channel 3, turning it on. We see channel 3 posted to my command line there. I am user 1 in Eos, and I was user 1 back on the Eos settings as well. I'll test that sneak. Looks like that link is working perfectly on the first try. So we're already off to a great start here. Okay, so I know that I've got my communication working properly. First thing I want to do is start experimenting a little bit to see how I can control my console to start patching these fixtures. And just to show you here, I've got nothing currently patched. So I just clicked on my patch tab. There's nothing patched at all this show. I have just a brand new show file opened up and ready to go. So using this message box here, we can mess around a little bit and start to experiment with different keystrokes and different string commands that we can send to our console. I will preface everything I'm going to do today with there are other ways to do this. Of course, you can use OSC. I am only using string UDP commands today. The OSC integration that I've been working on in FileMaker is a lot more advanced and a lot more complicated and is not quite ready for public consumption yet. So everything I'm doing in these lessons is strictly using string UDP, and I will, as we go through, point out some stuff that is easier to do with OSC or that you might want to think about as you create your own solution. Okay, so anyway, so I've got user 1, channel 1, full. I'm going to click send. Oh, and it looks like that script was unlinked, and we did this back somewhere in chapter 2. We changed something about that button. So I'm going to just quickly go in to that layout, doing Command L, and I'm going to change this script back over to, what was it called? It was Eos or MBS send UDP, just like that. So I've relinked this button back to my sending script. Now when I do it, hey, there we go, channel 1 at full. Let's see, channel 1 sneak, enter. Great. So that we know that this box is functioning, and having this EOS layout with this box on it is super nice because it allows us to experiment and figure out what commands we need to send to EOS in order for it to do what we want it to do. So the first step in any kind of patching is to take the console into blind and to go into my patch window. To do that via UDP, it is as simple as that string right there. Specified my user, specified the $, which is the start of a string, the key, which is patch, and then the # or the hashtag, which is our enter or our execute of that command. So if I click send, it has now taken my console into blind. And of course, it's doing that in front of me because I am sending this as user 1. If I wanted to do this all in the background, I could target another user, let's say 99 or something like that. So user 1, patch, that's it. I send the key, it's done. And now I could do something like 1 at 1. Look at that. It's patch channel 1 at 1. So what I am doing here is I'm actually sending just keystrokes at this point. It's going to get a little more complicated than that as we start to get in, but at the very kind of core of what we're doing, all I'm doing is sending that keystroke. So if I say 1 at 10, well, it's created a part 2. So it's going to get a little bit more, maybe we want to specify a part there. We could say part 1 at 20. And just like that, I could say part 2 at 21. Send. And you can see it's doing everything that I've asked it to do. Amazing. I love that. Okay, so let's check one other thing here. If we wanted to send the console back to live, I could say user 1 live, send. Just like that, you can see my channel is patched there already. Great, great, great. Okay, so now we're ready to start taking some of our data from our instruments and actually sending that information over to EOS. So I have got my layout here that I made before that is my kind of my worksheet. Of course, hopefully yours looks a little bit better. And all the lessons I did early in this, I just kind of focused more on function than form. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a quick layout for myself that is just the information I might want to see on a patch interface, for example. So I'm going to just essentially take this and make it a little simpler with a little less space. I don't need the work notes, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to open my layout editor. I've got my instruments. I'm going to just duplicate that because it's got a lot of the fields that I already want on it. And I'm going to change this. I'm going to call it instruments worksheet. I'm going to open it. And I'm going to close my other one so I don't make any mistakes. And now I'm going to just go ahead and edit this layout. Did Command L, and you can see I've got all these boxes here. I'm going to start deleting stuff that I don't need. And don't need any of this. Don't need any of this. Don't need this line anymore. The nice part about duplicating your layout is that some things you've already set up, like these sub-summaries, those are already all there versus starting from scratch. So I usually like to duplicate layouts and then kind of edit them versus starting from scratch every single time. And now I am going to just start moving these fields around and making myself a nice worksheet. So I'm going to speed through this really quick and be back with you in a second. Now for mine, I'm going to leave all these fields on here because I might want to use this layout for something else in the future. But really all you need to be able to see today is channel address, maybe type, and position. Okay, so I have got my layout here kind of made. If I make this a little bit smaller and then I go back into a list view, you can see I've got kind of almost a light-right looking layout here that has all my fixtures on it with just that information that I need. And then, of course, I can use my sort buttons within FileMaker to sort that information however I want it. So here I've got everything sorted by channel, and this is just a little bit of an easier way for me to see all of my stuff at once versus the old layout that I had before. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself a little button over here that will allow me to execute a script to patch these fixtures. So I'm going to go back into my layout editor. I'm going to make a little button. I'm going to put it inside the body here so that each record has its own button. this little guy, like a little send envelope, send to Eos. That'll be our button that executes the script. Now when I go back into the layout, you see I've got this button on every single record. Wonderful. Okay, so now I've got the layout ready. It's time to go ahead and work on my script. So I'm going to open up my script editor, Command-Shift-S, and you can see I've got all kinds of scripts from our previous lessons here. I'm going to make a new folder because I love organization underneath our Eos folder, and I'm going to call this patch. And then inside of that folder, I'm going to make myself a new script, and this is going to be patch instrument. Okay, so just like with every script we've ever made here, we're going to do some housekeeping at the very top. So here we go. So my housekeeping is going to be to freeze my window. It's going to be setting my error capture on, and I'm going to allow user abort. These aren't necessarily essential, but I like to do it at the top of every script when it's called for, at least. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start defining some variables. So at the very basics of the very core of what we're trying to do, we are trying to patch a channel to an address. So right away, the two variables I want to define to use throughout my script are channel. So I'm going to do set variable, and that's going to be channel. And the value of that variable is going to be my channel number. And then I'm going to set another variable that is address. Boom. Just like that. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, couldn't you just hard code those fields in? And of course the answer is yes. I like to put things into variables because it's just a little easier organizationally to see channel versus instruments : channel. Okay, so now that I've got those two variables defined, the next thing I want to do is go over and copy paste from a previous script the steps that I need to actually create the string to send. So in other words, I've got this turn channel on script that we created before. I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to copy paste these two steps, the message where I'm defining a message variable, and then the actual command here that sends the data to Eos. So I'm going to Command C those, come back over here and paste. Maybe I'll do a little housekeeping as well. Always label your stuff. Great. All right, so then the first thing I want to do is to take my console and take it into blind, or take it into patch. So I'm going to change this label over to patch. And then I'm going to change the message that it's going to send. And going to clean this up a whole bunch. Just basically that's it. All right. So to look at that real quick, it's got Eos user, the global variable. So that'll be user1. Then it's adding space, $, patch, pound. Basically what I've done there before I click send is I've recreated that. I've recreated this command that we have already established works. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to make sure that I have linked my button over to my script. So I'm going to click on it, perform script, patch instrument. Great. And now it doesn't matter which one I click. When I click send, it's going to take it over into patch, just like that. Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and unpatch one actually. Great. Okay, so I've got my patch. That's the first thing we need to do. And then the next thing we're going to do is to send the address over. I'm just going to copy paste these steps again. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to build myself the string that I know will patch that fixture. So we'll start with Eos user, and instead of patch, right here is where the other stuff is going to go. So I know that I want, let's just rebuild this from the beginning. So I want this to be Eos user and $, and it'll be end quote channel, and then adding at. It's important that I'm putting those spaces inside of my quotes like that, because that's how it's going to create my string. So channel at and then address, just like that. And then I also need to add another space and my pound sign. So we look at that real quick. EOS user and channel at boom, boom, boom. Great, that'll work. Love that, love that. Save. Okay, now create a little bit of a trap here because this is actually not going to work. But let's investigate a little bit and see why it's not going to work. So I click the send button. And it's done. Channel 1 address. Okay, great. Well, there's an address there. So what happened? Why didn't that work? Let's try channel 2. Still nothing. So, well, it's given us a confirmation. So if we confirm that, okay, cool, great. It patched a dimmer, but it didn't actually send an address over. So what is happening? The best way to find that out is for us to go over to our diagnostics window and to try to send it again. So I'm going to send that over. I'm going to look in my diagnostics here. So it looks like it sent correctly 2 at 11/234, which is what matches here. But this is kind of a little gotcha thing that unless you know about it, you don't know how to fix it. So that's what I'm here to show you today. So if we go back over here into our patch, it hasn't worked. For some reason, EOS does not like getting a slash unless it's surrounded by spaces. So 11/234, while it appears that it went to the console, it actually, EOS doesn't know what to do with that particular number. I'm not 100% sure why. Somebody smarter than me probably does, and feel free to put that in the comments. But I do know how to fix it. So in order to adjust that address to add those spaces automatically, and this is a great example of why we use the variable, I'm actually going to use the substitute function within FileMaker to automatically add that over to our address field. So I'm going to do a new set variable. I'll do this 2 different ways. I'll show you both ways. And I'm going to redefine address. And that's going to be substitute. And then the text we're substituting is the address variable that already exists. And then my search string is that /, and I'm going to replace it with space/space, just like that. I've created my address variable, and then I have gone in and substituted that slash for a space/space. And now let's try it with channel 3, for example. Sent it over properly. So just a little hidden gotcha that's there. And we'll try 2 as well. Great. Let's try 1. Great. Love it. Working well. Now you might notice right away, okay, yeah, of course it sent the address over in the right channel. It has nothing, we don't know anything about instrument types yet or anything like that. I'm not going to worry about that yet. We'll get to it later, and it's actually going to be the topic of a future video, how to create your own library for that. But if you go back and forth and you start doing some testing here, you see that as I click these buttons, it's sending over all the addresses properly and works pretty well. Now, what happens if I make an edit, for example? So let's say that channel 1 was actually supposed to be at 11/101 and not 11/201. So if I change that here, I say 11/101, and then I send it again, it's created a second part for me. And we experimented with this a little bit earlier when we were testing out our functions. We know that we have to define a part in order for EOS to know what the hell I mean by it. Because if I were to come in here and I were to say 107 and send it again, EOS is just going to keep creating parts because it thinks that's what I want it to do. This is where the whole idea of OSC bidirectional communication is great, because there's no way for my FileMaker solution in its current state to know what is already patched and what isn't. So the tools we're creating today are very much designed to go one directional. So it's kind of like, okay, if I'm going to send a patch over, I'm probably going to be working from a blank show file. It's not a lot of back and forth without me actively monitoring it. So in order to specify a part as part of this, and the same thing happens here, if I were to change this over to this, now all of a sudden I'm creating a whole bunch of parts, and I send it a bunch of times. See, it's getting all kinds of errors and stuff now. So I'm just going to define that part inside of this variable. So in my message variable here, I'm going to EOS user channel, and I'm just going to add part 1 at address. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to assume that we're only working with single part fixtures. If you are working with multi-part fixtures, then you can kind of take what we're learning here and backpedal a little bit and add it into your solution, it would essentially just involve needing to add a part to your instrument records. So you could define multiple records as multiple parts. But for now, I'm just going to hard code it in there. So channel part 1 at address. And then I'm going to come over here and just unpatch everything. And I'm going to delete, one and delete 2. Just so we have a blank thing to start with here. And now if I try this again, I'm going to send 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's say we're going to come over here and I'm going to change this address over to 299. And click send. There, it overrode it. And again, it's not smart enough to know if you want to override it or not. It's just brute force overriding. So you do have to be aware of what you're doing as you're doing it. Okay, great. So we've specified our parts. We've talked about adding the slash wrapper in there automatically. Wonderful. Let's go ahead then, and we will move on to how to send labels over. So you see here in our patch, of course, we have a label field. If we go over to our database, we've got all kinds of fields, and we're going to get to those in a little bit. But the label field is probably one of the most used, especially in my show files, because it allows me to see exactly what everything is, which is super great. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing I'm going to do is look at my script again, and I'm going to set a new variable up in the top here. And actually, real quick, I'm going to leave these as 2 separate things for now. And in a little bit, we'll show you how we can make this into 1 command. But for now, I'm going to leave them into 2. So I'm going to set another variable. I'm going to call this label. And I'm going to put my purpose here in this label field. All right, so label purpose. And I'm just going to copy paste, space it out a little bit, say send label. Okay, so now if you go back to our earlier lessons, I talked a little bit about how some commands in EOS are actually kind of hidden behind the scenes a little bit when it comes to editing certain things like queue labels and other target labels. So far, all we have done, I believe, is sending actual keystrokes and sending actual command lines over to the console. What we're going to do now is actually use our string syntax to send over, to send the labels as well as all of our text fields over to EOS. So if you look at this chart that I've put on your screen, it demonstrates out how the edit target command works. This is the string that we send to EOS when we want to edit something about a target in our console. So this could be a queue, a group, a submaster, a patch object, etc., etc. And that string is formatted as target, then number, then list number, part number, and text. So take a second and kind of examine that, and then I'm going to paste in to our variable here the string that we want to use for editing the label of our patched fixture. So I've got edit target label patch, then our channel variable that we've defined earlier, then a -1 here. This is in that list parameter area. Because we don't really deal with lists in patch, we put a -1 there. So if we have a list to define, you would put a list there. If you don't have a list to define, or if the target object that you're working with doesn't do lists, you put -1. Then our part number, again, I'm going to hard code that as a 1 for now. You might want to make it a variable for yourself. And then the label we want to send, and then of course the # to send it. Great. Love that. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to test it. I'm going to move this kind of down a little bit out of the way so we can see it. And let's come back up here to 1 and send it over. Just like that. Mover, wash, top. Here's 2. Mover, wash, top. 3. Get the idea. And if I change it, let's just make sure. Just add a 1 there. And because we are targeting specifically that channel, it's going to overwrite anything that I put there. Great. Mover, wash, top. Love it. All right, so look at that syntax one more time. Edit target, label, patch, channel, -1, 1, label, and send. Great. So now we've added our label stuff in there. Working pretty well so far. All right, what's the next major thing that we probably want to send over? Probably the gel color, right? So it doesn't show up on this screen, but if we switch over to our attributes, or excuse me, our database, at least we have a gel field there. So we can edit our gel field basically the exact same way we've done these other fields so far. So I'm going to make another variable, and I'm going to call it gel. And then the value of that variable will be color. Just like that. And then for the rest of our database fields, I'm going to use that same syntax that I used to send my label over. So my message, now instead of edit target label patch, it's going to be edit target gel patch. Don't have to change anything else other than, of course, the label. I'm going to switch this over to gel. And I'm good to go. And of course, change my comment, save. And let's test that out, shall we? Now, of course, there's no gel in any of these, but there's no gel in the moving light, but I'm going to go ahead and give it an RO2. And give this one RO4. Give this one RO5, just so we have some data to show. And now let's give that a shot. So move this. I don't have enough real estate in the screen here. Now it's as good as it's going to get. So if I make this a little smaller, then I go ahead and send over that data. There we go, gel RO2, RO4, RO5, just like that. So right away, you see exactly how powerful that is, right? Like anything you put in there, I can just go light by light and I can send over that data, and I've started to populate all of my fields with information. You can do that with your notes field. Let's say I wanted to send my purpose field over to notes. I could do that as well. I could concatenate a whole long list of things. I could have, purpose weight. I could have all that stuff all in my notes field. But where it comes super handy in EOS is when I start laying out things when I start inserting things into my various text database fields. So I'm going to do the first one here with everybody, and then we'll zoom through and do the other ones. And then we'll get back together here. So I'm going to copy paste again, and I'm going to say send text1. And I'm going to define at the very top up here. Let's say I want text1 to be my position. Now I'm going to say edit target text1, and then just like that. Simple, easy, right? Go back over here to my worksheet and let's try it. Uh-oh, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? Now, if I'm clicking around here, I'm saying, okay, well, it's sending something over. What is it sending over? I'm gonna go back over to my diagnostics and try again. Text1 patch, it looks like my position label is not getting there. The reason why this is happening is because of this magic little pound sign that I have on my position label. As we've already established, when EOS sees that pound sign in a string, it takes that as the end of the string. So if you notice here in the string that it's sending over, it's over already. Like it doesn't have anything after that pound sign because it counters that and thinks it's the end of the string. So there's two ways we can go about dealing with this. One of them is, of course, we could just get rid of all the pound signs in all of our position names, but that's going to potentially cause problems later when we go back and forth between LightWrite, or just for paperwork's sake, I like having the number sign there. So the easier thing for us to do is to take what we already learned earlier when it comes to substituting characters, and we just strip off that pound sign before it gets sent inside of that text field. So if I use the same kind of idea of what I had before here, and I do set variable, and I say text1, and then I say it's text, if I say it's substitute, text1, and I'm searching for the pound sign, and I'm replacing it with nothing. Double quotes there with nothing in between is getting rid of it. And now I click, now I save that script, and we go and we try again. I bet you it's gonna work. Just like that. One electric, one electric, one electric. Great. Now that works really well, but it's starting to get a little unwieldy here, and we have 10 text fields, so we don't want to do that every single time. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine these two things together into one set variable command. I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to copy paste this substitution. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to get rid of that step altogether. And here in this initial step where we define text1 for the first time, that's where I'm going to put it. But instead of substituting our variable, we're going to substitute, what was text1 position? We're going to substitute the field name there. So there's position. So I'm substituting whatever is in instrument's position, whenever the pound shows up there, I'm substituting it with nothing or with an empty field. And that's my new variable. And I could do the same thing here then for this address field. No reason you couldn't leave it as separate things, but I like to keep my scripts a little cleaner, just like that. Great. So now I've got that kind of all in one thing there. Lovely. I'm going to save this, and we'll test it again just to be safe, maybe with this guy. There you go. You see it's working properly. Love it. Okay. So now we're going to jump forward real quick and go ahead and define the rest of our text fields. Okay, so I have real quick just kind of copy paste all of this stuff in here. I've got text 2, I've got text 3, text 4. Now there are definitely ways that we could make this a little bit smarter and not define every single step of this, but for the sake of today's lesson, we're going to keep them as separate things. So I've defined text 1 to text 2. I've got all those things sending over, and then up here at the top, I could just set whatever variables, let's say I want to set this as text 2, and let's make this maybe unit number. And how about maybe text 3 could be, let's see, what's something else we have here that we have information in? Maybe instrument type. Of course, that would be in the actual type field, but for today's sake, we'll just do that. So now if I come over here again, and let's try it, bloop, that seems like it worked quite well. Yeah, looks good. Sending over the data properly. Of course, you might be thinking, well, don't I want my instrument type to be over here? Yes, we're going to get there. But for now, we see that the link is working properly. Now, there's one thing about this script that I don't like. For all intents and purposes, it doesn't super matter that we're sending all of this blank data. But when you're starting to send a lot of data about your show or you're patching an entire rig at once, the more steps there are that aren't doing anything, the more time that is going to take up. So like right now we're just doing this on a light by light basis. So it's kind of, we're defining that time for ourselves. But if I was going to automate this, I want it to go as fast as I can. And I want to put a little bit of error checking in this as well so that I know, hey, if this field is empty, then I don't want to send an empty string because there's no reason to take up that extra time. So I'm going to start that here with probably, we know that we're always going to have an address. We know that we're probably always going to have a label. We might not always have a gel. So why don't we start it here? So I'm going to give myself a little bit of white space here so I can see what we're doing. And then I'm going to wrap this entire 3 lines inside of an if statement. Actually, I guess it'll just be the 2. So I'm going to say if is empty, and that'll be gel. And I'm going to negate that because I want it to be if it is the case. So I'm going to say if there is something in the gel variable, then do this. If there's not, then skip over it. And that's a little bit confusing having to negate it like that. That's just the way the FileMaker syntax works. This is basically saying if has contents gel, but the way it wants it is if not is empty. So that's lovely for us. And now I can do the exact same thing again for each and every one of my steps. So text 1. Just like that. Of course, I cheated a little bit. I've already done it and I copy pasted. So pause the video, take your time, and add those things in. Just like that. So now, if we have not defined that variable at the very top of our script, it's not going to do that script step. For the purposes of our testing right now, we're not going to see a difference in that at all because it's so quick as it is. But I promise you that if you were to do this and loop through and do every single fixture with a 400 fixture show, it's going to add up pretty quickly and take some time. So the next thing we want to do is talk a little bit about fixture types and how to send that information over. The next video that I do in this chapter is going to take and create an entire fixture library for us that matches what's in Eos and automatically sends this information over. But for now, I'm at least going to show you how to do it manually. And if you want to work forward, you can. Otherwise, just hang out and wait for the next video to come out and we'll go a little bit more in depth about it. But to look at that, I'm going to go back over to my Eos screen here and I'm going to just send some strings over. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do clear command. Great. And now I'm going to experiment with how to send a type over. So let's go real quick and look and see what a potential type could be. Let's do channel 20, for example. 20 type generic fan send. Just like that. What about type Altman Q light? No, it sent it, but that's not exactly what we wanted it to be. So what's important here is knowing exactly what the manufacturer and exactly what the model is in the Eos library for every single fixture you want to patch. So right away you see that that can be kind of a challenge and seems to be a pretty daunting challenge. The next video, we're going to tackle that head on. So for today's purposes, I'm just going to show you this kind of generic demo. I could change this over to Parcan. Sends it over as Parcan, anything that exists in the library. But you see right away, it's important that we know exactly what the manufacturer and what the model types are for everything in our library. The next video, again, we're going to get into the weeds on that, and we're actually going to import the Eos library directly into FileMaker and have all 16,000, 17,000 of those fixtures existing in our files. After things are patched, I could go back through here and I can change the type of the fixture. That's not a problem. So you could do this two ways. You could actually pre-do all of your fixture types and then add your patch, or you could do your patch and then do your fixture types, or you could wait another week or two until I do my next video and see how to automatically send that information over as well. So the last thing I want to talk about today is how to automate this entire process. So right now we've been going through and we've been doing a fixture at a time. You know, there's however many lights, 213 lights in this show. So for testing purposes, it's nice to be able to go through and click one by one and patch them one by one. But I want to do it in a way that will allow me to patch the entire show at once and I don't have to think about it anymore. So if you've guessed looping script, that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to create another script here inside of my patch scripts folder, and I'm going to call this patch entire show. And I am going to say, go to layout. Before I do that, I'm going to freeze my window. And I'm going to go to layout, instrument worksheet, show all records, go to record first. Actually, before I go to record first, I'm going to sort my records by channel number. Already there, great. Turn my dialog off, go to the first one, and now I can start to loop. And inside of that loop, all I'm going to do is perform the script that I just made, and that was my patch instrument script. And then after it's done with the script, I'm going to go to record next. Exit after last on, done. This one little script that I just made will now patch my entire show. And let's watch it work. And you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna turn off this freeze window for now. I'm gonna get rid of it just so we can actually watch it kind of go pop by pop through the thing. And I'm gonna delete all my fixtures from Eos too, just so you can really see that this is working. All right, so I've deleted everything from Eos. Here's this. This a little smaller, and here we go. Run the script. Forgot to save it. There we go. Well, it was a little lackluster. Seemed like it went pretty quick, but if I scroll up, everything is there. All of that information I sent over is there, just like that. And it's mapped exactly the way I told it to. It's It's got all that information in there. Just like that. The whole show is patched other than types. Now you notice there's a little bit of encoding error here in the degree designation, degree symbol. You'd have to experiment a little bit. It's going to be a system by system thing if you're on a Mac, if you're on a PC, and figure out why that's happening. But as I scroll through, you can see that all this information is here. The only thing that it doesn't really do is label those text fields, but I can do that really easy. I can say text1 label position, text2 label unit, text3 label type. Of course, I forgot to send Gobo over, but you could send Gobo over the same way. And just like that, we're done. So the only other thing that you might be thinking as you look at our turn channel on script was, hey, or excuse me, our patch instrument script was, hey, this is really cool, but what if I want to change what goes into those various text fields? What if on one show I want text1 to be position, but on the other show I want it to be gel, or I want it to be weight? So you could change it in your script. And in a future video, probably in video 3 of this series, I'm going to get into how to make this a little bit more dynamic. So you could actually remap parameters, remap patch parameters to whatever you want them to be. This is most evident with our address field. Let's say you're doing a show that just has all dimmers and you're not using the address field, but you're using the dimmer field. Now, if it's a one-to-one system, then chances are that data would be duplicated, and sure, you could copy paste the dimmers over to the addresses or vice versa. But it would be more powerful if you could choose exactly what to send to the address field in Eos. So we're going to get into all of that in the third chapter of this series. And again, in the second chapter, we're going to cover how to add the Eos library over into your existing solution. So that's it for today. I hope that this was helpful, and I hope that this has kind of opened your mind up to all the possibilities of how you can use these building blocks that I've given you to create a really powerful patching tool. I've done this on lots of shows. I've had issues where the Lightright import didn't work properly, so I've said, you know what, I'm just going to take this CSV that I've exported from Lightright and I'm going to pop everything over to the Eos really quickly. And I like it because it allows you to see what's happening as it's happening versus a Lightright import where everything is happening in the background and you don't necessarily have as much fine control over things. So stay tuned for the next few videos and make sure to reach out if you have any questions, and please show me what you've built with this. I love seeing what everybody has done and the tools that